Here we are back with Conscious Conversations Series 2, and I am so excited to have my lovely friend Lauren Swan with me today. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Maddie. How are you?
I've never had it so good. This is the best day of my life.
That's that infectious, joyful energy I love to see around.
Oh, thank you. We're going to talk about the subject of health today, and I am going to start us with a prayer, an angel prayer, a prayer for healing.
Just so everyone knows, if you hear an airplane, I am sitting in my garden.
Oh,
So we're outdoors, really soaking in the Los Angeles weather, which includes overflying planes.
do you know it's been such a long time since I've been on a plane, as probably so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, these are all just little prop planes. So it's people with their little private jets, I
Oh,
suppose,
yes.
jetting around Santa Monica, as it were.
A prayer for healing. Dear Angel Raphael, healer of the universe, please transform the hurt and sickness inside me into healthy understanding. On days in which the pain seems too much to bear, please touch my heart and head and help me find my strength. When my body is broken, please wrap me in your arms of love and pull me back together. When I reach into the void and feel alone in my suffering, please extend your open hand and clasp mine to prove that I am never alone in the universe, full of powerful, gentle, and benevolent spirits. May your constant attendance focus my ability to heal myself. And when my sickness is not of the body, but of my heart and mind, and I feel lost or unable to cope when times are dark, please bring the light of your love and comfort. Please open my eyes to the beauty surrounding me and remind me to look in the bright places for the steadfast joy in my life that sometimes seems obscured. And through your guidance, may I bring your healing to the world and all around me. And so it is.
So it is.
Yes,
I
and
love
so it
that.
is. Me too. So, just for the listeners, Lauren Swan and I met about 5 years ago in America. And you're originally from Australia, right? Is that right?
I'm originally from New York City. My mom's Aussie, my dad's American. Yeah, lived in England for many years, and we met through a mutual friend who I went to drama school with in London.
Right. There's so many crossovers and so many places involved in your life that I get confused where I met you.
No, I don't blame you. I'm surprised people aren't like that with you as well. With
I
the,
think they
you've
are.
bounced around. Yeah, I mean, we're sort of citizens of the world at this point.
Yeah, I'm a citizen of the world. I love that. And so you, Lauren, 2 years ago started what is now an award-winning podcast called UNINVISIBLE Pod. And
Yeah.
I am really excited to hear more about this and how it came to be. I know that we've both had our own health issues, so I'd love to hear a bit more about what made you start this podcast. Let's start with that.
I love that. Thank you so much, Maddie, for that lovely introduction.
Yes.
Yeah, so as it happens, you and I met, yeah, it must have been 5 years ago. It feels like I don't remember a time I didn't know you,
Right.
you
Yeah.
have those connections with people. And I actually 3 years ago got really sick and had to leave my work. I was really just, I couldn't function anymore. I just sort of lost all ability to function and was searching for answers, searching for community, and kind of came up dry, but also managed to connect with a lot of close friends and family who I didn't know were also walking around with invisible chronic illness, which I was eventually
Mm.
diagnosed with myself, diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid, as
Wow.
well as obstructive sleep apnea, most recently insulin resistance, which can be a precursor to diabetes type 2. So very aware of that. Sorry about
Mhm.
the plane again here. And prior to that, as a teenager, I had been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and had been experiencing panic attacks. So there was a lot already in my health history. It got ever more complicated. I didn't know where to turn. And I'm a trained actor. You know me as Lauren Swan, which is in fact my stage name. And I decided to use my real name, Lauren Friedman, to
Oh,
launch the
yes.
podcast in January of 2019. And it has been a huge part of my healing journey. I interview people who are living with invisible chronic illness and disability, their
Mm-hmm.
caregivers and loved ones, survivors and thrivers,
Mm-hmm.
and as well as practitioners across a range of healing modalities, from all the way from holistic to and like alternative treatments to traditional Western medicine. So really covering the gamut there in this very niche yet broad topic of its own. And it has helped me heal, figure my stuff out, given me incredible loving community, and really opened my eyes to disability inclusion and the importance of us all being in community together.
I think that's so relevant. I was diagnosed with MS probably about maybe three years ago now. I was actually back in Scotland, and I had a whole bunch of health things taken care of in Scotland because we have the NHS and we have the healthcare there. And I knew that something was really wrong with me because my energy levels were so low. And when I would go on a hike with friends, I was finding my left side really hard to move. And actually, at the time, just before this, I was going to the gym 3 or 4 times a week, and I was doing Zumba. And one day I was doing Zumba class, and when it came to moving to the left, my body just wasn't moving there. So I just set me on this journey of trying to figure out what it was. Anyway, long story short, I decided that I wasn't going to take medication, and I wanted to heal myself, and I really, really wanted to use the best supplements. And I've been doing that for the last 3 4 years, and so far, thank goodness, I've been feeling really well and healthy. Yes, my energy levels do drop, and I notice a significant change in my physicality. And during COVID, I would normally, I mean, if it wasn't COVID, I would normally be swimming every day and going to the gym. I stopped my gym membership and the pool's closed. So it's been quite challenging because I'm not the most motivated when it comes to doing exercise. And yet I know that, like yoga and gentle stretching are, at least, like, for the least, to do the least is so important. And so it's very interesting that you call it an uninvisible pod, because to look at me, or if I'm walking down the street, most people wouldn't know or think that there was anything wrong with me, apart from the fact that I'm actually very positive anyway. And I look for the lessons and things and what's this trying to teach me. But for me personally, it's very interesting that I've had to really step out my comfort zone at times and say, this is what's going on with me. This is why I can't keep up. Can we slow down? Or no, I can't do this hike this weekend with you. And it really, it made me really be truthful with myself, but mainly with other people that I would have otherwise tried to hide it from. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting that you talk about the uninvisible. And so what's been your journey, and when it, like, in terms of like noticing the difference in your body from like unhealthy to healthy, and how you're managing it now?
For me, it was a similar thing where I started experiencing what I now know to say to doctors is
Mhm.
functional exhaustion. I was so fatigued, I could not get out of bed. And I was having that along with joint pain, unexplained weight gain. I was experiencing brain fog, a lot of
Mhm.
cognitive decline. And I wasn't functioning at my normal optimum, right? My
Mhm.
body just felt sluggish. It felt a bit like I kept trying to get to a certain place that I just couldn't play catch up to.
Mhm.
And I ended up spending an entire weekend, 40 out of 48 hours in bed, right after my 34th birthday. And it's interesting to me that you and I both got sick around the same time. I mean, 3 years ago, I started trying to figure it out. And the process
Mhm.
of even getting a diagnosis, getting the right kind of, which for me looked like functional medicine treatment, can be really
Mhm.
hard in this very rigid American healthcare system.
Mhm.
So that was a challenge in and of itself. I experienced something called medical gaslighting, which is when I had a doctor tell me it was all in my head, which
Oh,
was really
wow.
shocking. And as it happens to a lot of us. And
Wow.
actually, I'd been doing my own women's health activism work as well, and writing about periods and period equity. And all of a sudden, here I was reaching out to my own network on Facebook, of all places, and in personal conversations, and saying, I've got this going on. I don't quite know what it is. And so many of the people I knew, particularly women, I'm probably 95% women,
Mhm.
started saying to me, and these are people who, like you, who I know well, or who I've lived with, or close friends and family were saying
Mm-hmm.
to me, I've also had my own health crisis that I never told you about. And I have this ongoing chronic illness that's invisible that I've never talked to you about. And knowing that there weren't these open conversations happening, that we were stuck in stasis with the healthcare system and with our relationships with our caregivers and providers because we weren't talking about it either. And that there's so many different ways to approach these illnesses, to approach wellness. Really made me think these conversations are so vital. I was learning so much,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to be able to share that. And being that I'm a trained actor, a voice actor like you know, like I've got a microphone, I thought, let me hit record. And that's exactly what I did. And the conversations have been so life-changing, not just for me, because I've now become a patient advocate professionally.
Yes.
Excuse me, but also because they're making a difference to other people, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
like shifting my work from working for other people to working for myself in such a compassionate way in which I can share positive experiences
Mm-hmm.
and experiences of healing with other people. Life changing, completely life changing. Like, I mean, there's a grieving of my old self, if you will, and yet I wouldn't exchange my experience for anything, because even though it was hard and the price of admission to this chronic illness club is high, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it changed me. It changed me in a very fundamental way and made me a better person.
It sounds like it's your calling. It sounds like it's what you're here to do in the world. And
Yeah.
I find it incredible that we are both doing exactly the same thing, but with different, different topics. And that's how this whole thing started for me, Conscious Conversations, because I would have these amazing conversations with friends or people that I was working with or healers. And I'd be like, I wish I'd pressed record. I wish we could share this with people. So now, my mission is all about spreading love, light, and joy in the world and looking at the silver linings behind any challenge that happens and what are the lessons, what are the gifts. I had my birth chart read when I first got back to the States. So it was probably around September 2018. And one of the things that we talked about was health. And the person told me, which I really, really think is very accurate, is that this didn't just show up like out the blue, like you said 3 years ago. This is something that has most likely been brewing in my system for probably a decade, probably like leaky gut or whatever it was, maybe build up of stress or anxiety over the years. Because I, like you, had panic attacks in my 20s, had suffered major anxiety. And thank goodness I managed to learn how to control that. And I don't have it anymore. If I start feeling a bit anxious and I can tap into that part of my body and know what to do, meditation's been a huge thing for me. So with regards to when these things pop up, the synergy of it was that I was very unhappy in my job and I was really stressed out there, but trying to deal with it. And that's when my time was for this to then bloom and to come into fruition. But
That's
I actually,
exactly how it happened for me.
right.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
And I'm sure it was building up for years before. And people had told me in the past about leaky gut, and I ignored it. I didn't know what it was. I wasn't into wellness then. I didn't really think about it. I took my health for granted, as you do when you're much younger. And that's another reason why, like you say, you're living your most compassionate way, like with in terms of what you're doing with your life and how you're serving other people. And that for me has become like my number one main thing. Like I will not engage in work or do something that I don't love. I won't do it now. And when you have a sensitivity to or an awareness of or feeling like there's something not quite right in your body, like in physical health, it's so important to avoid stress or to keep yourself feeling calm or free of these things that are very detrimental, mind, body, soul.
I couldn't agree more. And I would actually say that I'm more connected to my body now than I ever have been. I've learned to listen to her
Mhm.
and to trust that, like, my body has a deep, deep knowledge and intuition that I have had to learn to tap into. I think I took my intuition for granted. I took my body's messages for granted. You know, I
Mhm.
got functionally exhausted, but if I'd really been listening to her sooner, I would have known sooner that something was up. It wouldn't have taken a weekend of me not being able to function at all. And maybe things wouldn't have built to such a crisis point.
Right.
But however it happens, it's meant to happen that way. And I do
Mhm.
believe that my body kind of saved my life in that
Mm.
sense. Like, I
Yeah.
could have gone on practicing really poor health habits, possibly maybe eating poorly or, doing something with my lifestyle that wasn't helping my body. And also with mindset, which has been a huge part of it, and I think once you get a diagnosis as well in this chronic illness community, one of the things I really struggled with was that there's a lot of negative feedback. You can go into Facebook groups and meet people who are like, woe is me. I'm having a terrible day. And look, you're allowed to have a moment and have a terrible day, but if that's your only narrative, what I'm trying to do is have conversations that are beyond that narrative, where we can go like, I'm giving myself a moment. I'm giving myself this concentrated time to be Eeyore, and
Yes.
I'm going to come out of it and be Pooh, and find the positivity and dance with my pants off. Because at some point we have to recognize that like there is a joy in this kind of transformation. And I wouldn't know some of the people I know if it weren't for getting sick. I wouldn't have developed the knowledge and expertise that I've developed and deepened my true friendships in the ways that I have if it weren't for the diagnoses that I've experienced. And particularly with autoimmune disease, all autoimmune disease starts in your gut. So, so many of us are walking around with gut dysfunction of some degree, and we don't necessarily know it. And it's not until your body lets you know, and you really have to tune into what your body's teaching you. I think it's probably easier for someone who's a dancer or like some kind of trained movement practitioner, right? But as someone who is a real lay person, or, I don't really know a lot about that. I didn't know a lot about it going in. And yet now I find that I need to, do regular practices with my physicality, with my mindfulness, to bolster my health on a day-to-day basis, and have created really structures in my life that are there to support my ongoing wellness. And once you lose your health, you also go through this experience of like, you hold it so much more precious as well. It's what you talked about when you're younger and you're a bit more laissez-faire with taking care of your body. You might have a rough night and recover quickly, but you don't recover in the same way as you begin to age, as your body begins to respond to its environment. And our environments can be so toxic, particularly in urban areas. There are so many factors that feed into this, but what it has taught me is a huge lesson in boundaries, in strengthening the strong relationships, in releasing anything that was weighing me down or holding me back, and really focusing on the people and places who showed up to support me, and creating that symbiotic, kind, compassionate relationship with myself and with other people.
I love so many things of what you just said just now. I feel like I want to go, yeah, and. So,
I know.
so one of the things that you said, it makes so much sense that you went through acting school, that you are an actress, you have a voice, and look what you're doing with this voice. So that's my first thing. It's like so clearly meant to be. And I love that in life. Again, I talk about Krishna Das all the time because I learn with him and I think he's amazing. He talks about how he always wanted to be a rock star because he wanted to sing, but he knew in his 20s he was going through depression, he was suicidal and depressed, and he met this guru, and he realized after learning with this guru in India in the 70s when he was only in his 20s that, you know what, if I became a rock star, I would not have lived. My ego would have had the best of me. I would have been doing it for other people. I would have got more into drugs and all this kind of thing. And so he used his voice to lead kirtan, and he now has a huge following all over the world doing good. But his whole thing is, I'm doing it for me, I'm doing it for survival. I'm not doing it to teach you how to sing. I'm doing it because it's coming from me. I need to do this to live. And I was told very clearly by my higher self and by my guru that I need to sing with others, community. So he now does this, and that's how he used his voice. And it just reminds me of the fact that you went through that training, like maybe at one point in your life, I want to be an actress, I want to be famous, I want to do voiceover work and use my voice for this. And then this happens. And who better a person than to be an advocate for health with the voice that you have and the ability to connect with people. So that was my first thing that I wanted to say that I just love about you, because you do it so well. So the other thing
You're so kind. Thank you.
Oh, it's true. The other thing that I wanted to just to acknowledge is that I totally agree with, and this is one of the reasons why I don't talk about health so much, is I totally agree with the whole avoiding the woe is me thing, because I also really believe that we all have our own paths. And if and I've been again learning another teacher, Michael Bernard Beckwith, and we looked very closely at what it is to live in victim mode versus manifestor mode. Victim mode is things are happening to me. Manifestor mode is things are happening by me. And then there's channeler mode, things are happening through me. And there's being mode, things are happening as me. And it's been very clear for me to see again, like how and where we live in victim mode. And so I no longer ever say this is happening to me. Like I'm out of control. This is like not, I don't know what to do about it. I mean, yes, I agree. Of course, you're going to have feelings of sadness or maybe feelings of grief, coming to terms with the new version of you. But I can honestly say that every year gets better and better. And I feel like as I'm getting closer to 50, I'm really getting ready to step into my fullest power. And I care less about what other people think. And so there's just something very strongly about, what is this trying to teach me? What is my body's wisdom telling me? It's my inner compass. What can I learn about this? What patterns and programming have I taken on from childhood and maybe from people, from my ancestors, from my parents who were doing their best, but passed this on to me that is not mine. It's not my stuff. So what can I learn about this? What is it you're trying to tell me, body? And if you can get to that place and not just be sitting around in a circle talking to people about how terrible life is because of this ailment or this disease, yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I'm so glad that that's what your community is about, for you and for them and for the
Yeah.
world.
I have to say I'm so fortunate in that sense that I've had the privilege to be able to pursue this work, and I love that you bring up some of these amazing spiritual teachers like Michael Bernard Beckwith and Krishna Das, because I've also had the pleasure of doing a deep spiritual dive as a response to what I've gone through and discovering my spiritual path, which I think is ever evolving. But, realizing that while I don't subscribe to any particular religion, I certainly have a way of seeing the world and seeing it through my experiences that ultimately I want to be able to reframe as something positive at all times. The way that you spread joy and light and love in the world is exactly what I'm trying to do in my corner of the world too, and I think it's important that we be able to share that among one another, because if we can pass it on to one person, they can pass it on to the next. I love that you brought up that concept of our higher self actually being in community with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's such a poignant concept at a moment like this in American history too, where we're waiting on this strange election that's approaching. The holidays are coming. There's a new year happening. We're in the middle of Mercury in retrograde yet again this year, and there's been so much turmoil in the past several years here. And to be able to witness that from this brand new perspective, where I also learned to move from victim mode to manifestor mode and to channeler mode, and like to be able to understand that there are these other lenses that you can see your experiences through. And when you're able to rationalize and reframe those experiences, there are lessons to be learned, but that at the end of the day, the most important thing is that we can all be together. It's about finding your true self in a sea of other people too. I think it's important that we remember that like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And I think that's where American individualism in many ways has gotten a little bit out of control, because there's no longer necessarily that care for other people in our decisions. And I'm trying to reset that with the work that I'm doing, as I know you are as well.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, because this is the time. This shift in the universe, this shift in the world has been coming for a really long time, and it's shown up as COVID. And it's maybe like in the past, like years ago, I remember even being in Scotland and seeing these incredibly detailed and heartbreaking adverts on TV when you only had 4 channels on TV, and it was Ethiopian children that were dying of starvation. And in my young mind and in my very compassionate humanitarian mind, even at that age, I remember just feeling so sad and so helpless. Like, what can I even do for these children? They're babies and they're in another country. And it was always, oh, they're in Africa, they're in another country. That's really got nothing to do with my life, even though I feel for them. And this COVID situation has brought, like, almost like taken down the boundaries and really allowed us human beings on planet Earth to really understand what everyone else is going through as well. Yes, there's lots of different levels. Yes, we're not all in exactly the same situation, financially, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, but we can all relate to what's going on in the world right now. And even with politics, we can all relate. There's a lot of anxiety. And so that's also another reason why I am so not surprised that your podcast, Uninvisible Pod, yes, you started 2 years ago, but it's really thriving now. It's so relevant. It's vital that people have that space. And for me as well, this work that I'm doing that I've only started since COVID. I mean, I've been doing it for many, many years, but professionally and every day, it's become my lifestyle. And this is another benefit. I actually posted in my Facebook group recently, what has benefited you since COVID? What things have you found that have come up that have been a positive influence in your life or affected you and others in a positive way because of COVID or during this time? And some of the answers were mind blowing. People like one lady found her father that she hadn't met for many, many years. And, people were like starting businesses and connecting with their family in a much deeper way than they ever were able to before. There's so many benefits. And that's what I also talk about, the silver lining. Like, no matter what is going on and how bad it is, there's always something to learn. And this is coming from someone that I experienced anxiety, full-blown anxiety in my 20s. And then I had ovarian cancer in my 30s. I had some surgeries there and I managed to deal with that. And thank goodness I'm healthy again. And then in my 40s, it's been MS. So there's been something that, again, from a healing perspective, wanting to heal people and really use my intuition and listen to my body, which I always took for granted. And I still don't eat exactly as the way I'm meant to eat. I still eat sugar and I really need to cut
It's
that
hard.
out. Right.
It's hard.
But the other thing I wanted to say to you was, you mentioned something a while back about fatigue or about our energy. And it's amazing the difference that I would feel in my body. Yeah, you were talking about your body's wisdom. And it's incredible to me if I'm having a good day, if I'm feeling really positive, if I've had really great interactions with others, then my physicality feels stronger. I'm able to walk easier and I feel much more buoyant. I feel much lighter, much stronger just from my mood and from my emotions. And that was the main thing, the key indicator to me that when I was working in a company before, that I was finding it very, very difficult to stay positive all the time, even though I was trying so hard. On the outside I was, but in the inside I was really struggling. And that had such a detrimental effect on my health and my energy day after day after day, feeling negative or put down or not being able to be heard, things like that, which all sound victim mode. But many of us have these experiences when we're working in corporations or in companies where it's not the right fit. It's not the right match. And so that's another thing that I find is such a key component to my health, is the reason why I'm all about positivity. And that does not mean sticking your head in the sand and pretending the world is in a bubble and everything's fabulous all the time. It's just that's where I want to put my attention to what is great about life, what works for me, what am I proud of. And that's where I like to go and what I like to talk about and share with other people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's interesting too, because one thing that's coming up for me as you're talking about this is something that comes up a lot in the conversations I have, which is this concept of privilege. That you have to, some of these experiences, our ability to reframe, to make different choices come from places of privilege, and that we're not all privileged with the ability to have a great support system, have easy access to good healthcare, have access to good produce and food, fresh foods, So understanding that layer of the conversation, I think, is also so important. And that's about that collectivism, right? Understanding community over individual as well. But also, I was thinking about this idea of negative self-talk. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I'm sure you know of. I'm not sure if everyone in your group does, but I love his work. I think it's fascinating. And he's referenced in many talks I've listened to of his, a study that was done on plants where I believe it was groups of school children had plants, and some plants they said lovely things to, and some plants they said horrible things to. Same plants in the same growing conditions. The only variable was how they spoke to the plants. And the ones that were told nice things thrived. And the ones that were told they were horrible and didn't deserve to be there died. They got sick and died. Right. So if that can happen to plants when that's the only variable, imagine what it does to us as well. And there can also, we can be taken into this realm of what's also known in the wellness world as toxic positivity, right? When there's, well, but you must find the silver lining, you must find the positivity. And I subscribe to an amount of positivity that works for you, which is why I say I think it's also important that, like, forgive me for the plane again here. Speaking of, they heard me say toxic positivity and they came flying in. But, you know, that like you give yourself that time to breathe. You give yourself that moment to reframe. You give yourself the space and the time, if you have the privilege of being able to do that, to find ways to meet your health in a way that is productive for you. Which is not to say that everyone needs to be happy all the time or sad all the time, but I do believe in balance and in moderation. Same thing with like eating sugar and eating well and poorly. You know, I don't eat perfectly all the time either. And I recognize how much of an impact that has on my health. But I'm always striving to be better. Each day I wake up and I strive to be a better version of myself. And I think if we make that choice consciously every day, and if we give ourselves a moment of peace and calm, I mean, I find meditation really helps for this, you know, before the world gets in the way, and social pressures begin to pile on top of us, particularly if you're what I would call a highly sensitive person, which I certainly am, and which I think you are too. We're so much more affected by the people and environments around us. And in that sense, we can be very empathic. But you have to be careful not to get into compassion fatigue too, you know? So like, it's just about those healthy boundaries and balance. I'm constantly learning more and trying to do better every day. But there's a lot of like forgiveness in that for self and for others, and just sort of softness, learning a bit more softness in a world that kind of trains us to be harder on ourselves all the time.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying. It's so important to allow all the emotions to come to you, to really acknowledge if you're feeling anxious or depressed or sad or unhappy or frustrated, because it's really only through these things that you can make changes. And it's allowing yourself to feel that and to take the time out and I used to hide that a lot throughout my life. If I was feeling sad or miserable, I would really try and hide it in my 20s, because I was always the person that everyone would come to feel better. So there was this pressure on me that I put on myself. There was only maybe one or two people I was ever really, that I felt I could be really honest with about how I really felt. And even then I would still maybe keep some of it for myself. Whereas as I've got older, I've realized that the more you share these things and the more you find your community where you're not going to all go down the tubes together, but you're going to share your experiences and what now, what next, what can we do? Like, we're more than our physical body. We're so much more than our body. We're, you know, our soul houses our body, and we're so much more. This body is the vehicle that we have in this lifetime to be able to live life and to be able to manifest and create and express ourselves through our senses, and to really, reminds me of that movie Ghost, you know, when once he's passed and he's not in his body anymore, and she just sees the coin going up, and she can't hug him, she can't touch him, he can't do anything because he's not in a body. So it's also just really appreciating the body that we have, that we've been given in this lifetime, and doing the best we can with it.
And also knowing that like you can't have joy without sadness. That these things come together, and you need one to balance the other. You need one to recognize the other in your life too. So being able to take both on and be okay with that, you know, there's a peace that we have to seek with that, a peace and a joy in that peace.
Yes. Polar opposites. We're out of time. Can you believe how fast that went?
Oh my gosh, it went so fast.
Right.
I felt like we've been talking for 5 minutes.
Me too. So how can people find UNINVISIBLE Pod?
Yes. So you can find me at uninvisiblepod.com. That's the main website there. You can listen to the podcast anywhere you stream or subscribe to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, etc. You can also find me on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, which is my main feed, at UNINVISIBLE Pod. That's UNINVISIBLE, UNINVISIBLE Pod. And my name's Lauren Friedman. You can always look me up. And please feel free to contact me through the website or otherwise. I'm always happy to talk and hear people's stories. And I hope that we all continue to grow in light and joy together.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, Lauren. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been so gorgeous. Can we do it again?
Yes, definitely.
Well, I think we should say everyone stay tuned because Maddie's going to be on my show at some point in 2021. So we'll be continuing to collaborate. So watch out for that.
I love that. Take care, love. Talk to you soon.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.